We have with us an esteemed panel to discuss the current political fault line amid the ongoing state elections and what it implies for the national political strategy for the general elections ahead. We are joined by Shri Sharat Pradhan. He's a veteran journalist, author, and political analyst with more than 4 decades of experience. He's well-recognized expert in dissecting the complex UP political dynamics. He's also the author of the book Yogi Adityanath, Religion, Politics, and Power, The Untold Story, which was released very recently. We also have Mr. Rahul Verma, who's a fellow at CPR and professor of political science at Ashoka University. His research interest includes voting behavior, party politics, and political violence. He's a regular feature in various news platform and media platforms and has published papers in key global research forums. He recently authored the book Ideology and Identity, The Changing Party Systems of India. He has a PhD in political science from University of California, Berkeley's USA. Lastly, we have Roshan Kishore, who's the data and political economy editor at HT. His work is widely followed and largely revolves around the intersection of politics and economics with data-driven approach. Roshan holds a MPhil degree in economics from JNU and was a visiting fellow at Center for Advanced Studies in India, University of Pennsylvania. Without wasting time, I'll pass on the baton to Roshan to take the conversation forward. Roshan, over to you.
Thank you, Madhvi. Hello, everyone who's come here for today's discussion. I will not take much time. We have a set of 2 very good speakers who between them bring the wealth of experience and research together. So I've been told that it's a 60 to 70 minute event. What we'll do is we'll have initial remarks by both the speakers, and then we'll have I will have some questions to them, and then we can take questions from the audience. Sharatji, would you like to make some initial remarks to begin with? You're on mute, Sharatji.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be amongst you all, and I'm told that the gathering is largely that of young people, and it's always a greater pleasure to be among young people because youth is the agent of change, and change is the essence of any democracy. And what we are going through at the moment is a major democratic process, which will probably write the destiny of the country ahead as well. Because as you know, I'm referring to Uttar Pradesh because, as everybody knows, Uttar Pradesh sends not only the largest number of lawmakers to the national parliament, but even in the state, where 403 seats, which is the largest number in any state in the country. And that is what makes all the difference. And particularly this election is bound to make a lot of difference to what happens in 2024, is because it's a common belief that the road to Delhi goes via Lucknow. And that's the reason you find BJP in particular, which is ruling the state, going all out to ensure that they return to power in the state. And for that, all top leaders, the top leadership of the country, top leadership of the ruling party is literally camping here. And it's no mean task for the opposition to fight back. 3 months back, if you had asked me what is happening in Uttar Pradesh, I would have said it's a clean sweep. The saffron color is bound to come back. But as time has gone by and as the election has moved from west to now to east, it's a 7-phased election, and it began from the far western corner of Uttar Pradesh. And as it is moving eastwards, there appears to be a drastic change in which way the wind is blowing. Initially it was because the opposition we all felt that the opposition was almost dead and lying completely dormant. And Akhilesh, who now seems to be the main contender against Yogi Adityanath and the entire Saffron Brigade, was looking extremely laid back. He appeared to be very timid. Mayawati was already not to be seen anywhere. She was almost invisible. And these two being the main parties, it was believed that probably BJP could get some kind of a walkover. It was only Priyanka Gandhi who was showing up on various occasions when there was crisis and when issues needed to be raised against the government. But then her tragedy was that she still doesn't have a party organization. And without a party organization, you really can't do electioneering. And to win an election, you need that. Eventually, when Akhilesh seemed to be a reluctant player, and his biggest problem was that he was all alone. Everybody knows about the family feud that led to the disaster in his party in 2017. And this time he was all alone, father ailing, infirm, old and infirm, the uncles out from the mainstream party. So he had to do it, and some other senior players, some having left the world, some being behind jail, for instance, Azam Khan. So, but when he started coming in, and the kind of response that he got, initially, honestly, and let me tell you, I thought the response was coming because it was in Western UP, and Jayant Chaudhary being very well entrenched there, and that's the reason he was getting. But no, as the election moved, the response became bigger and bigger. You can see when there are rallies, crowds are more often than not collected by political parties. And you can always see the difference between a collected crowd, paid crowd, and a spontaneous crowd. And that becomes visible in the excitement, in the responsiveness, in the reactions. And it became increasingly visible that a bulk of the crowd was not being brought there. It was emerging on its own. And I think that is what gave Akhilesh a big boost. And I think he must have been surprised with the own response that he was getting. There were important factors in the UP election right from the beginning. And since every time I talk, I begin from the West, because that was the area that had witnessed a major farmers' movement for a period of 13 months before the election. And as you all know, on the borders of Delhi, and the farmers were against the 3 laws that had been ushered in by Prime Minister Modi. And this movement was largely against that. What happened? That became an important factor in this election, because it was a divide between a large chunk of the farmers are Jats. And 2013, there was this infamous Muzaffarnagar riot, major communal violence, which left almost 70 people dead and more than 50,000 displaced. And that had led to a sharp divide between the Jat community and Muslims. And that went in favor of the BJP, the communal divide, because that led to a large-scale Hindu polarization, following which BJP swept the election in 2014 in this area as well. And the Modi magic played the wonder in 2017 and 2019. Now, what has happened? Why I talk about this farmers' movement? It was this farmers' movement which apparently brought the Jats and Muslims together again. They got reunited, which is what became a major concern for the Bharatiya Janata Party. And that is seen as one of the major reasons why Prime Minister Narendra Modi decided to roll back those laws. But no, and it was believed in the BJP circles that the rollback of the laws would probably lead to the farmers falling in line with the BJP, and that would again lead to a divide between the Muslims and Hindus in that region. But that did not happen. The withdrawal of the scrapping of the laws came in a little too late, and it was too little. By then, demands had increased, which is very obvious when you have a movement running for 13 long months, during which a number of more than 700 farmers are believed to have died during the agitation, during their involvement in the agitation. So the withdrawal failed to make any impact. And the first 2 phases of the 7-phase election in Uttar Pradesh the first two phases happen to be largely in Western UP. And there, the way people, the aggression in the voting. Let me tell you one thing, that when the voting in election, this is my personal observation, my experience, when you see aggression in the voting, it usually reflects that the the turnout is more for change. It is to defeat someone rather than and to bring a victory to someone, to another one. And here, let me point out, I wouldn't be surprised if so far what one has seen in the first four, particularly the first three phases, four I would come later, that even the third phase, it was quite visible that there is some kind of anger. And that anger is against the ruling. So the vote may not have been so much for the Samajwadi Party as it was probably against the BJP. That's how I have read it. And by and large, from what I gathered, I have visited a number of places and I have been in touch with people in different corners of the state. What my feedback is that there are various issues. I'll come to those, but by and large, it seems that the wind is blowing not so much in favor of, wouldn't say as not so much against BJP as it is against the sitting Chief Minister, Yogi Adityanath. And there, let me also point out that, when Yogi Adityanath was appointed Chief Minister, it was not a very happy situation in the BJP leadership, because probably Prime Minister Narendra Modi wanted somebody else. It was common knowledge that he wanted to bring Manoj Sinha, but various things that played, and eventually the RSS agreed on Yogi. So he was never accepted, because Yogi was never a hardcore BJP leader. He was never in the RSS. He grew up on his own steam, and what he had formed, what is called the Hindu Yuva Vahini, and then because of this mutt, the Gorakhnath mutt coming to him in the form of inheritance in the sense that he was the main disciple of his guru Avaidanath, who eventually handed over the leadership of the mutt to him. And because of the mutt, his entire following came because of the mutt. But as a Mathathish, at the head of a religious congregation, you generally become, it is not because of the communal aspect, but even otherwise, I think that heads of religious congregations are not used to dissent. So they have this psyche of intolerance. And that's the reason he has become dictatorial, which is why he could not make space for himself within the BJP. Even in his own government, in his own cabinet, there was a lot of dissent against him. And it started becoming visible in this election as you have seen, how a couple of ministers belonging to the OBCs switched sides. They switched to Samajwadi Party. Now, at the time after the elections were declared, invariably what happens during elections is people march out of other parties and gravitate towards the ruling dispensation. When this starts happening from the ruling dispensation, people are switching over, then there's definitely something wrong. And this is what happened. As many as 9 OBC MLAs and 3 OBC ministers in the Yogi government switched sides. And they went to Akhilesh. And this was a strong turning point again in favor of Akhilesh. Because, the OBC, the non-Yadav OBCs had in the previous elections remained with, and it was Narendra Modi's, he really worked hard to bring over a large chunk of the non-Yadav OBCs to the BJP. Even a section of the Yadavs had switched because of the Modi magic, which got lost because of the open, overt tilt of Yogi Adityanath towards the upper caste. in general and the Rajputs in particular. You know, when Yogi Adityanath towards in the last 1 month or about 2 months back, he went to the extent of declaring publicly कि मुझे तो गर्व है कि मैं राजपूत हूं और राजपूतों में तो भगवानों ने भी जन्म लिया है. Now this has not been taken well by a lot of people, including a large chunk of the Brahmins. And you know, UP being a caste, the politics in Uttar Pradesh is heavily caste based. This is another factor. But because Brahmins are not in a very large number.
Can you wrap up the initial remarks in a minute or so? Then we'll come back in questions.
Okay. I thought I was supposed to. This was there. Okay. So now this caste factor becomes increasingly important, and because Akhilesh succeeded in building these stitching these small alliances with parties representing these small sections of communities, this also went against the BJP, and it is believed that this will eventually make all there are other issues like stray cattle, unemployment, price rise, corona mismanagement. We can come to those later. Please go ahead, Roshan.
Thank you, sir. Rahul, will you do your presentation? You're on mute, Rahul.
Can everyone see my slide?
Yes, beginning.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madhvi, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be on the same platform with Sharatji, whom I have read and grown up reading his work on UP, and my friend Roshan. What I'm going to do in 8 to 10 minutes. So, one, elections are like markets. No one actually knows what's happening, which like you can only make informed guesses about like looking at shares and historical trends and what's happening. And then you make decisions about investment. So what I'm going to do, I'm basically going to talk about the state of play across the country, across 5 states, and then I'll focus like Sharatji on Uttar Pradesh. And I'll be happy to answer questions on other states as well as on UP. So the state of play is very clear. 5 states are going for poll. BJP's incumbent is 4 states, marginal player in Punjab. Congress, on the other hand, is opposition in 4 states and marginal player in UP. So in a way, Congress, if you can sense things, Congress was poised to do well in at least 4 of the states by just being the default opposition, but they were putting the most resources in the state where they are the marginal player. AAP, which is the third party which is emerging, moving out of its home ground from Delhi, has high hopes in Punjab, could emerge as the single largest party and likely to make significant inroads in Goa and Uttarakhand. And at least like AAP's entry will, in a way, tilt the balance in favor of one party or the other in Goa and Uttarakhand. Goa and Manipur being small assemblies, last time also they did not give a clear majority to any particular party, but in both states, BJP, while being the second largest, managed to form government. And it is very much possible that you, again, given the size of these assemblies, you get a hung verdict there, and it's post-election coalitions that are going to decide what happens in these 2 states. UP, because of its size, as Sharatji pointed out, it will have an impact on the national politics going forward, but don't treat this as a semi-final as it gets projected in the media. No election, semi-final only gives you ticket to play the final. It does not decide who will win the final, right? So the way what UP can only do is change the political discourse in newspapers and TV channels, but it will not largely change what might happen in 2024. Of course, it will boost the morale of one party, lower the morale of other party, and bring certain changes in campaign structure. But I think what will, like, once after UP results come out and what happens in Gujarat and Himachal, in both states, BJP is incumbent. And basically a combination of UP plus Gujarat is going to have a much greater impact on what the national discourse might be after this year. Now, Coming back to UP, which is basically one of the most important states, and if you look at the electoral patterns in the state, BJP in 2014, 17, and 19, it managed to get a historic high, basically more than 45% of vote share. What's happening, basically, BSP and Congress and others, like smaller players, are shrinking. SP has been, in last 10 years, largely stable around 25, 28% of the vote. So BJP, which is touching 40 or crossing 40, and SP, which is around 25, 27%. This is just the average. I'm not saying this is where the parties stand, right? Now, the big question in 2022 is, can SP manage that gap? And this is a table which Roshan created in HD. So I just took that table from his HD piece. Based on Lokniti CSDS 2019 poll, what it basically shows that BJP managed to create a very, very large and coalition of extremes in some cases. So in some ways, it was getting 80 or plus percentage among upper caste. In fact, Jats, which Sharatji was just pointing out, voted in a historic high numbers. 90% of Jats voted for the BJP in 2019. They also managed to create a wedge between non-Yadav OBCs and non-Jatav Dalits. So what BJP actually managed to do in these last 3 elections, it basically got a very, very high proportion of votes among Hindu society. Even among Yadav, they managed to make some dents. Among Jatavs also, they managed to make some dents. So now they have a very, very broad coalition. And so that makes basically SP's task to win this election a slightly difficult. This is the forecast which many pollsters have come out before 2022. So most of these forecasts were released in January. And the bottom line of these forecasts is that none was giving SP an advantage. Basically, the maximum they were going for SP was around 32 to 34% votes and around 166. That's the maximum side. And everyone was basically keeping BJP lowest at 220, which is basically easily crossing halfway mark, and somewhere around 250, 270. Some have even gone above 250. So that's the state of play you are looking in Uttar Pradesh. Now, can campaigns change elections? I'm slightly sort of like, both theoretically and empirically slightly have a different view on this from Sharatji, and I wrote about this on the day election started in HD, because the way I think that there is a historical structure of competition, and it's very, very hard for campaigns to overturn the competition. I'm not saying they cannot make marginal changes, but elections are won and lost on accumulated sentiments. So some shares do well. There are always going to be exceptions, but exceptions can't be the rule. So the way I think about elections, there are 5 features which make up for accumulated sentiment. It's 1, narrative, message, and platform. 2nd, performance of the incumbent and performance of the opposition. 3rd, leadership differences. 4th, social coalition. And 5th, the resources or organizational advantages that parties have. And on all those 5 things, it's very, very hard. I'm not saying SP is not better than BSP on any of BJP on any of those things, but BJP is in some ways a formidable machine on all 5 indicators. It can compete. And the other advantage it has, basically an advantage of 100 seats and more than 10 to 15% of vote share. And this reading that basically politicians switching from ruling coalition to opposition tells us something different. West Bengal was basically very opposite, right? A lot of people migrated from Trinamool towards BJP side in the run-up to elections, and we all know the result. So I think even not just like pollsters, journalists, but even politicians really don't know what's happening during the election, right? If politicians always knew which way the wind is blowing, we should have been seeing higher rates of defections, and people basically, those who are defecting, they are more likely to win. So like us, like market people, even politicians are hedging their bets in an uninformed, in basically an environment where you have not all information with you. So basically, in some ways, BJP has certain, so they are mobilizing on their ideological platforms of Hindutva and hyper-nationalism, which is core to their strategy. Then they have welfare plus representation argument. Then they are basically putting some eggs in basket on that we have created some infrastructure and tried to improve the law and order. And again, as I pointed out, leadership plus organizational resources. On the SP side, the advantages are that they're mobilizing on the social justice and religious harmony campaign. They have leadership, as Sharatji pointed out, of Akhilesh Yadav, plus they have managed to stitch lots of smaller players with them. They're also banking on the agitations and unrest of farmers and youth and inflation and unemployment. So these are basically, in some ways, the key pillars on which each campaign is built. Before the polling began, I ran some simulation models for India Today. And basically, it was based on one assumption. And I think there is a consensus on that assumption, which is that this election is largely going to be bipolar. Bipolar meaning it's not that BSP and Congress won't do anything. They can, of course, tilt balance in favor of one party or the other, but more or less, basically all other players, barring SP and BJP alliance, will be restricted around 25-26% of vote share and around 35 to 40 seats. So basically, these two coalitions will have more than 75% of votes and around 360 seats. So SP stands today where BJP was in 2012 with 47 seats. BJP managed to basically overturn everything and got 300 plus seats. Can SP do the same? Yes, it's possible. But something happening twice in a row with that magnitude of double-digit shift is very, very hard. So SP to even level, and these are 4 scenarios. SP not only needs to get votes, so what we were basically doing on the x-axis, saying, okay, SP's vote share is increasing, but what we were varying is proportion of votes that were coming from BJP. So if SP gains 1%, if 0.25 is coming from BJP, then SP needs basically more than 10 percentage points to turn the election. If more than 50% of BJP votes are getting transferred towards BJP, towards SP, only in that case, SP would need somewhere around 7 to 8% to level the election. And that's a massive swing in election. And this is for my next piece, where what we did, assuming that BJP had a very bad phase 1 and phase 2, where they might lose 5 to 7.5% point. The reports on 3rd, 4th, and 5th phase, which is going, BJP is less
Rahul,
likely.
can you wrap up in a minute or so?
Yes. BJP is less likely to have a similar kind of damage, and that makes SP's job really, really hard going forward in phase 6 and 7. So given how the arithmetic is arranged, SP will find it really difficult to basically match or even go beyond BJP. I'll basically stop here. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Sharatji, for excellent initial presentations. I'll begin with a question, or rather 2 questions, which are meant for both of you. And I request both of you to be brief so that we can take as many questions as possible. Sure. One is, there's by and large an agreement on the fact that this is pretty much a bipolar election between the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Samajwadi Party. 2014 was almost like a triangular election because the SP had the burden of anti-incumbency in the state, and its credibility had taken a hit after the Muzaffarnagar riots. After the BJP won in 2014 and more importantly 17, the narrative was that opposition unity was lacking, therefore the BJP won. And then in 19, we had the very unlikely scenario of the SP and the BSP actually coming together. So the question I want to ask is, why is it that the SP recovered and the BSP did not recover in the run-up to 2022? That nobody is even talking about the BSP seriously today. The second question is, Rahul, like Sharatji said, that I think 173 assembly constituencies are still left to go to polls in the remaining 3 phases. So the biggest question is the adverse momentum from
172.
Is the adverse momentum from Western Uttar Pradesh actually continuing for the BJP, and will it hurt the BJP going forward? Now, UP is a very big state, so Azamgarh and Muzaffarnagar are poles apart in terms of pretty much everything. The question to ask is, theoretically, it is one way to look at it. But one way, one thing which has sort of characterized the BJP is the BJP today is an extremely centralized party. No political leader comes close to the stature Mr. Narendra Modi enjoys, or probably Amit Shah enjoys. If Yogi Adityanath wins this election in Uttar Pradesh, he will be the first chief minister since independence who has actually completed a 5-year term and won a re-election in Uttar Pradesh. And his stock in the BJP will go very high, probably as close as Narendra Modi's, because UP is a very big state. And ideologically, he's as close to the BJP as it gets. This will also mean, and this, I'm bordering on conspiracy theory here, that this is bound to create a lot of heartburn in the Bharatiya Janata Party also, because it will also mean that he's extremely young. He's not even 50, I think. That a lot of political careers would be closed very prematurely. Sabotage, etc., within political parties are not unprecedented things. So, the question I want to ask is, if there is an impression that the BJP has not done well in the first 2 or 3 phases, do you think that there would be an element of sabotage, going forward from within the BJP also? People who would be happy to see, for example, what the BJP did to itself in Bihar, where they actually tactically propped up Chirag Paswan in a bid to probably contain the LJP, and they almost lost the election. I think 4 or 5 seats here and there, and the NDA would have actually lost power in Bihar. So these are the 2 questions which I would want you to weigh in upon, and then we'll go forward.
Well,
Either of you can go. Yeah.
Rahul, you may go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, Sharatji. Let me basically take the second question on momentum and Yogi, and perhaps Sharatji may have a better sense of why BSP has. So first point, yes, it's possible to, so, and that's why I think even if a moment, so one, I don't think that momentum which was in the first phase was even in the second phase. Forget about third, fourth, fifth. So I think by third, fourth, fifth, so across UP, more or less, BJP will lose certain seats. That is going to happen. But the kind of losses that it suffered in phase 1, I think 1 is getting exaggerated, and 2, it is basically not flaying from 2/3, like by third and fourth phase. I think, given what I can see or glean from the data, is getting contained. And in fact, in the 6th and 7th phase, you may see BJP not like bouncing back from its 2017 position, but across the phases, you may see some sort of like tactical alliances coming between BJP and BSP, especially in the last 2 days. Nice things Shah is saying about Mayawati and Mayawati is saying about Shah. And the reason for this is that in the 6th, 7th phase, others actually have a lot more vote. And if that goes towards SP more, then basically election may become uncertain, or SP may come close to say 170, 180 mark, given what's happening. But I don't think that momentum is carrying. In fact, even the Bihar example, which you talked about, RJD led in the first phase. In the second phase, BJP leveled up, and in the third phase, they took advantage, or did NDA alliance, right? So it's not basically one momentum is created and will basically build on the way will build on. It can be, and that's where like a strategy of political parties and feedback comes into play. They can curtail the losses covered in the first and basically change the course. Second point on which is the speculation on what would, you are absolutely right. Yogi is contesting this election against the weight of history. No incumbent has come back to power, and no chief minister in 30 years, and no chief minister has returned since GB Pant. Yes, political sabotage is possible, and it's very much part of politicking. You have more enemies within your own party than in the opposition. So sabotage is possible, but BJP also knows that losing basically UP, right, would basically create difficulties for its own self. So forget about who will take the national center stage after, like if Yogi wins, BJP's own campaign going forward will be in a difficulty. And given what we're also saying about centralized nature of decision making, that will ensure that sabotage is basically to a lower extent. But whether Yogi, after winning this election and perhaps delivering 2024 UP to BJP, only then I think he will come into the second rung of leadership. It's not automatic that today he wins and he's in the second spot. There, like, you know, in politicking, it like perceptive weight also matters. So it's not your ability to just win UP, but also other things will play a role.
Well, can I come in?
Please.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would like to point out that I don't go on the premise of the assessment that was shown, that done by different TV channels. We all know it's an open secret how TV channels function, the kind of advertisements that have been bombarded on them, bombarded in the sense doled out to them. Obviously, that plays out in the kind of the assessments that one has seen. So if you take that as a benchmark, I mean, I have nothing to say, but I personally don't agree with that. And going by that, and then you're building all your futuristic approach, I don't think it works. And then when BSP is concerned, coming to BSP, let me tell you, this is not a fresh, anything new that one has seen. It has only come, it's become more visible now that Amit Shah is praising Mayawati, and Mayawati was, right from the beginning, BJP never attacked the BSP as much as it was doing Congress, which is non-existent. Virtually, it is nowhere in the scene as far as forming a government is concerned. But Narendra Modi was busy attacking the Congress more, and of course Samajwadi Party, but never as much the BSP. That is the reason why there was this common perception that from day one, that BSP is team B of BJP. The same view was about OAC, AIMIM. And the reason was very simple. As far as Mayawati is concerned, everybody knows the kind of disproportionate assets cases hanging, that sword dangling above her, the ED and CBI, her brother, her other family members. So there was this reason to believe that she has been intimidated systematically to keep her out there. And that's probably the reason that she never showed up. It's only towards the end that she started addressing rallies. Otherwise, she was limiting herself to tweets and press releases. And everybody was surprised, including her own party cadres. And that is the reason you have seen there is a lot of, there was a revolt within the party. And everybody knows that BSP, because that it is on Mayawati's name that people win the elections. So it is a common belief, and it's a common, it's a wild, it may be seen as a wild allegation, but everybody knows and nobody disputes this, that as far as BSP is concerned, you have to pay a price for the ticket. And so that has been going on, all right. But where does it stand in this election? It may continue. It has always, there's an argument in their favor is that Mayawati continues to retain a certain section of the vote. Fine, it did. Even in the last election, it did to 21%. But that doesn't translate into seats unless you get incremental vote from somewhere, which is what she succeeded in doing in 2002. Now, to expect a repeat at this time, which the BSP leaders, including she herself and Satish Mishra, have been claiming, but a little rather late in the day. So that is the reason BSP is virtually written off in this election, and that is why it is widely, even BJP began to believe that the election is largely bipolar. Amit Shah making that statement now, or Narendra Modi talking about BSP, makes it all the more evident that they want to confuse the voter and to tell them, to their advantage naturally, that BSP is also a serious player, which everybody has seen it is not. And the 11th hour, if you start talking about it, obviously you are wanting that people should go for BSP, and BSP's purpose as team B is perceived that they would make a dent in Samajwadi Party vote bank, in the vote. And if they succeed in doing it, it's advantage BJP. That is why OAC was ushered in here. But OAC's game also didn't seem to play. As we will see, of course, that on March 10, but is the manner in which he seems to be fading out from the campaign. also displays the same reason. So it is too late in the day for making these kind of remarks, which may help to confuse everybody. Everybody can see the game. So I don't think this is so much of a factor. BSP is not so much of a factor, and the game eventually will be played between SP and BJP. And let me also tell you, it's fine that when as the election moves, and Bihar or Bengal are not very good analogies, very practical analogies as compared to Uttar Pradesh. In UP, even in the last election, there was cascading effect of the victory in West. The environment that was created in the West, it had cascading effect right till the end, to the extreme east corner. And so I agree that it may not have the same kind of cascading effect this time, but certainly to imagine that the eastern phases are going to be in the same. I also agree with this theory that when you have climbed the Mount Everest, you have to come down. And BJP with 312 seats, there's every reason for them to not even dream of going further. You have to, but how much it comes down is becoming, how much it is likely to come down has already, there have been indications in the first three phases. Even in the fourth, even BJP insiders are not claiming that they have done, that kind of sweeping. And in the East, I feel there will be a lot of other factors playing in, which have not played out in the West. For instance, I said this stray cattle issue and corona mismanagement may impact the voters a lot here, because they are poor farmers with small holdings. They have to guard their crop all night, sit with a lantern and with a lathi all night, which doesn't happen in the West, because there are affluent farmers. They can afford to hire guards and have labor looking after their crop. And that, I have traveled in Eastern UP and everybody talks about it. But no political party talks about it. Surprisingly, Prime Minister talked about it in the last 3 days, when he said that he would come out with some new technology to use gobar to earn their money. This comes in sharp contrast to what he had said about gobar when he was giving gas cylinders, because that time he was worried about women having to cook with the gobar kantas, and the kind of sufferings they had to go through because of the inconvenience they had to go through because of all the smoke. That's why he was giving gas cylinders. Now he's coming up with something great about, though Bhupesh Patel from Chhattisgarh said that they are already doing something with gobar and providing some kind of, bringing it in the, as a part of source of earning for the farmers. So let's see.
Yeah.
But because the fact that
let me ask another question here and sort of interrupt you there. So, we are talking economy now, because the cattle thing is largely economy versus, people would like to, eradicate the problem of stray cattle. But Hindus are also extremely uncomfortable with the idea of cattle being slaughtered. It's also a fact. I'll come to a different question. So one of the things which this SP has promised in its manifesto is restoration of the old pension scheme. So the Rajasthan government presented its budget yesterday, and they have announced the restoration of the old pension scheme. And there's pretty much jubilation across Rajasthan today. Now, materially, it makes eminent sense for government employees, because government employees who retire with low salaries, even medium level salaries, it is very difficult for them to kind of finance their retirement savings, etc. Now, we all know, and UP is not the exception here, most state governments, their finances are in very bad shape. This kind of a promise, do you think it will generate some sort of, a cross-caste traction for the SP? Because the BJP has not promised this, and state government employees, for example, school teachers suffered heavily during the second wave of COVID-19, because the UP government actually sent them on panchayat election duty. A lot of them died. People claim that the official numbers are gross and underestimates. Rahul, you can also weigh in on this. You have a book on ideology. This kind of a thing, a tangible material gain. Does it have the potential of swinging, say, a class of voters? Either of you can go first.
Well, Rahul, over to Rahul. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, in UP, it is certainly going to make a difference. I see every time I'm going on various live debates from across streets and you find a huge crowd there at every, I am on the panel of India Today and Aaj Tak, so we're doing a whole lot of programs from the streets, and you find every time there's a huge a chunk of people who are prodding you to talk about pension, the old pension, being restoration of pension. And I think this could be a game changer as far as a section of the voters are concerned. And because even the younger people who are working in the government, they know that tomorrow they have to retire. And minus the pension, what life is going to be, they all understand. They know that a chunk of money coming in at one point of time is not what is going to sail them through. And social security is extremely important. So I'm sure this will impact. And when we were talking, can I just take another minute?
Yes,
Roshan. Since we were talking of economy, the cow and its economy makes world of a difference to UP's economy. UP is the biggest exporter of meat in the country. UP is one of the top footwear manufacturer in the country. And all this has been very seriously impacted on account of Yogi Adityanath's obsession for protecting I don't know how much protection he's providing to the cows, because in the gaushalas, the cows are in an utterly bad state. And in any case, buffalo is not something which is banned under law. But you are creating circumstances where even buffalo cannot be, is being avoided by people. Today, if you are seen standing next to a dead cow, which might have died on its own, because after all, everybody that takes birth has to go, you could be lynched. So all these things, eventually, it is the same people in the villages. Yes, you do come across people who say कि नहीं साहब गैया को कटना नहीं चाहिए, तो कोई बात नहीं है. But at the same time, they say कि हमारी पेट पे लात पड़ रही है, our crop is being eaten away. So this is something which is not going to be just overlooked and forgotten by the people.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what make election analysis very difficult, because each of these issues basically work in very different directions. And to say any of those issues can change the result definitely or in a very big way is difficult to determine. So welfare, yes, it matters to people. But when was it offered? What was the party's performance on the welfare issue, right? So BJP will also be mobilizing a lot of people on welfare. And as Sharat rightly pointed out, yes, and you also pointed out in case of Rajasthan, pension will help. But what is the portion of government employees in this whole sector of UP employment structure? Then how many of them are upper caste, right? So then basically caste angle also playing. So given that all of these are basically cross-cutting and going in contradictory direction, for me to say that one of this will change the UP election is very difficult. And that's why I talk about accumulated sentiments on multiple things. And so whenever you will talk to voter and your length of conversation increases, they will talk about each of these issues, right? The same voter will say that cattle is hurting me because it's like, coming to my field and destroying the crop, and it's economically hurting me. But the same voter, after some time, if he or she is a Hindu or upper caste OBC Hindu, they will be also against basically cows being killed and their meat being sold. So that's why it's like I don't want to comment on, not comment, but basically be able to judge how much of each of these issues can shape the verdict individually.
All right. One more question, and then we'll take audience questions.
Can I point out one more thing which is related to the economy?
Very briefly though.
Very briefly, unemployment. Now, unemployment is what is making the youth angry. Yogi Adityanath has been claiming that he has provided 4.5 lakh jobs to people, but the official records say there are 5 lakh vacancies even today in the government, and they have not been filled. And RTI queries have not evoked any response from the government as to where these 4.5 lakh people have got jobs. And that is what has angers the youth. And mind you, the unemployment has increased not because of Corona. Pre-Corona figures of the government of India show that the employment and the economy, the growth of the economy pre-Corona had gone down to 4.8, or even, sorry, less. Today it is 4.8. That pre-Corona it was even lesser, slightly lesser than 4.5 or something. Whereas in Akhlesh's time, it had touched 7.9. So which speaks of the, I think, the half-truths that government believes in bombarding, I say. Their advertisements and their claims, how much they impact.
Just one more thing, because economically, like you said, there are problems not just in Uttar Pradesh but the entire country. But we know for a fact that the BJP doesn't just win elections on economic issues. It unleashed demonetization and won the UP elections last year, which caused immense economic pain. One of the things which the BJP has made this election about is that they are citing a return of Samajwadi Party Raj and Gunda Raj. Now, I mean, the SP has that kind of a legacy because it was associated with the party of Yadavs are a dominant caste. So the question to ask, I want to ask you very briefly, if both of you can weigh in. Now, outside its core support base, that is Yadav and largely the Muslims, we can probably assume that Muslims will vote en bloc. One of our viewers actually has a question on whether Muslim women will vote for the BJP. I don't think they will, but I would like you to weigh on also. Outside its core support group, do you think this law and order issue will hurt Akhilesh? Because there is a problem of people like Akhilesh. Their party was created by their fathers. And for example, Tejasvi Yadav in Bihar, also RJD. They grew as bundle-based party. Now, Tejasvi and Akhilesh, they want to portray some sort of a new image, a 21st century leader and all. But can they successfully overcome the past baggage of their party or probably their fathers, the kind of governance models they've had?
No, you're absolutely right. I agree with you that it will adversely affect Akhlesh's future. That's the reason Akhilesh is busy trying to project the new slogan that they have come up with, Nai Hawa, Nai Sapa. This is how they are going. And in 2012, when Akhilesh had won, the turning point in his favor came when he single-handedly opposed the award of ticket to DP Yadav, the notorious gangster from Western UP. And his father, uncles, all were keen to give him a ticket, but this chap didn't. And that made a lot of difference to him. Agreed, Samajwadi Party has this image of, some kind of that Gundas have a free run in the Samajwadi Party. There is no denying that. And that is what BJP is trying to build the whole campaign on law and order thing is. But it will impact. But how much one sees, because, the difference, Gundas have a free run in every regime. Even today, the difference is that if Gundas were on a free run in a Samajwadi Party regime, today there are specific instances where they have been extended patronage, protection by the government, whether it is the Unnao gang rape case in which the BJP MLA Kuldeep Sengar was systematically protected by the government until the High Court came in and really took the government to task. Then only action was taken against him. In the Hathras incident, the Supreme Court had to move in. The Chief Justice of India had to intervene. Then action. There was an incident of a young trader being beaten to death by a police inspector in Gorakhpur, which is the Chief Minister's constituency, and nothing happened to him for 13, 14 days. It was only again after the intervention of the court and the issue was raised in the media that action came. Whether it is Lakhimpur, there are umpteen such instances. Yet, but the perception, what you have said, is absolutely there, that Samajwadi Party could create problems as far as law and order is concerned, because they are seen as a party, allowing Gundas to have a free run.
Thank you, Sharatji. Rahul, you want to weigh in quickly?
Yes, quickly, Sharatji is absolutely right on what he said. I think the advantage which BJP gets on issues like law and order is not that they only talk about law and order. They cleverly mix law and order with their ideological platform of Hindutva/communism. And that makes it a much more potent weapon in mobilization.
Which is what I'll add here. If you permit, I'll just add here, make it more intelligible to everyone. What Rahul said very rightly is that when they talk of criminals, It is only Muslim criminals that they name. And the action that they've taken, drastic steps that they've taken, is also largely against them. So it serves their ultimate, the larger goal to forge a communal divide. But let me tell you that this time, that Hindu-Muslim divide strategy, the Hindu polarization, is not working as it did in 2017.
Yeah, I mean, the reason also is that the BJP actually needs to have a very huge Hindu polarization. I mean, it is not enough for the BJP to polarize 60% Hindus. So that's there. We'll move to audience question. Bhupesh has raised his hand for a long time. Bhupesh, can you please briefly ask your question?
Yeah, hi. So I've been, in these panels in 2019 also. The talk at that time was also about this stand thing that, all these cows are trampling on the field and farmers will not vote for BJP. There used to be talk about big caste-based alliances like we are having today in terms of OBC leaders moving to SP. At that time, it was like Mahagathbandhan, SP, BSP, Yadav, Muslim, Dalit, Bahujan, all coming together, along with Lokdal, Jats also coming together. At that time, when we discussed with the pollsters at that time, the number that used to come was 20-30 seats to BJP at max, given all these arithmetic. The number finally came out to be 65, if I'm correct. Now, is it fair to say that that post Modi coming in, all these arithmetics are not yielding results at the ground in terms of the actual results that we are getting?
All right. You want any particular speaker to answer this question?
Maybe Mr. Pradhan can answer.
Well, as far as that is concerned, 2019 was a different election. It was Modi's election. And I concede that when it comes to Modi magic, then there is no match. So that's the reason people say Modi bhakts and unbhakts, these kind of jargons that have come up. So Modi, this is not a Modi election. Modi may be seen as the biggest star campaigner, but people know that Modi is not going to become chief minister of UP. And as far as what you talked about, the caste alliances, in 2019, the alliance that was struck between Mayawati and Akhilesh, it is already an open secret that it was done largely from Mayawati's end. It was done only to teach Akhilesh a lesson for what his father had done to her in the guest house incident way back in the mid-90s, when she was almost probably she felt that she would have been killed by the SP goons. So and that's the reason the BSP vote never got transferred to SP in 2019. And with the result, Mayawati won 10 parliament seats from nothing, and Akhilesh got only 2. So that was not a real alliance on ground. Today, the scene is different. Today, the smaller castes have aligned with Samajwadi Party, and some of them have come originally from SP only. They went to BJP and now they've crossed over to SP, and they are certainly going to make a difference.
Thank you, sir. Paresh, can you ask your question, please?
Yeah. Any comments or any thoughts on women voters, how they are shaping up?
You want any particular panelist to answer the question?
Both of them can answer. Yeah.
Sharatji, Rahul, any of you can take this.
Rahul.
So that's a great question on women voters. We actually don't have a good idea on how women voters in UP are going to behave. The reason is this. For last many elections, BJP used to have a disadvantage among women voters. And this is the trend from 1990s. It started changing in 2014, and by 2019, BJP has managed to fill that gap. So there is no disadvantage now BJP faces. This is nationally. But in states, women voters are becoming crucial, and they are basically shifting their weight behind one political party or the other. We saw that happening in Bihar. We saw that happening in Bengal. We also saw that happening when Jayalalitha was alive in 2016. Women voters in some ways gave her that victory. So there are different instances, and some analysts and reporters from the ground, I can read from that reports, that we might see women voter basically, shifting towards one side. And if law and order issue becomes very crucial, perhaps that shift might happen towards BJP. But if other issues, younger women might be feeling the same burnt of economic downturn and unemployment and other things. And if SP manages to convince them, they can shift that side. So women voters in 2022 in UP, I think, will be an important category.
May I add something there, Roshan?
Yes, sir, please.
No, just here, it's very interesting because women voters are very important to both sides. And BJP is the reason that, when they talk about law and order, there's a focus on women as well. You must have seen how all the BJP leaders insist on claiming that now women can move out of their homes at 6 o'clock in the evening. I don't know which state they are talking about, but they are referring to Uttar Pradesh only. I don't see that happening on ground, and women also can see it. But yes, it is certainly an important issue. And what you had said earlier, I would add one line there also about women voters among Muslims. I don't think that shift is happening, because that is being built, and that expectation is largely drawn from what they have done into triple talaq. Now, triple talaq is not a ground reality. It is a myth. It used to happen in the 60s and 70s. It's hard. Likewise is love jihad. No, but BJP is, because love jihad, I've written in my book also, which is published by Penguin, that, of all the cases that they registered on love jihad and triple talaq, a lot of them turned out to be just fake cases. There was no truth in it. And in love jihad also, they were Hindu-Muslim marriages with consent, with mutual consent. So a lot of narratives have been built on falsehood and half-truths. How much it plays out, we'll know on March 10.
Thank you.
Fine. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Yatin, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Rohan. So my question for all the panelists is, will this election throw up an absolute verdict for one of the formations? If it's a close one, some of these, smaller outfits were with one alignment, given that they have a track record of dubious integrity. How do you see that playing?
Very good one. Good question.
Sir, should I take a couple of more questions? Then maybe we can answer them together, because a lot of people are raising hands. You can club.
No, you can go ahead. Go ahead. I'm not in a hurry.
No, we'll take a couple of more questions.
Okay.
Avinash, you want to ask your question?
Yeah.
Hi, Avinash. Yeah.
Hi. So a question for Mr. Pradhan. So firstly, when he said that pension part, now there I would say that if at all, one admit that the government employees even today are better off even without pension, the overall salary and compensation structure. Now, knowing the state finances, the pension is something that, one can promise, but probably very difficult to implement, and eventually it had to be abolished. That's number one. Second part, when it comes to law and order, of course, we can go on debating individual incidences, but there is a sea of difference when it comes to SP versus anyone else, even Mayawati included, and that's, I guess, that. And then coming to COVID-19 mismanagement or management, of course, there is no debate that, most of the states mismanaged, including UP. But someone who is coming and saying that the BJP's vaccine and COVID is a hoax and myth, do you think voter is going to trust that party for COVID management? And coming to that triple talaq, yes, when he says that, yes, it may not be prevalent, yes, but it's just like you can say that, manual exavenging is not prevalent, but did not that require a law? Of course, it had its legal sanctity. Earlier. Now they have stopped. Now, whether it turns vote or not is a different issue. And of course, on top of these things, of course, temple remains an sort of a, non-economic, but an issue. Put all these things together. I don't think that, these points are weighing the way, you believe that, in favor. Rather, most of these points are going very, very against Samajwadi Party, particularly the law and order, on COVID.
Well, law and order, yes, it does go, and Samajwadi Party has not been able to really counter it with the same kind of commitment that BJP is spreading this against them. But agreed that even the Mandir issue goes in favor of BJP. But Mandir, let me tell you, is not adding any further value to the BJP. It is the same voter who will anyway vote for the BJP is impressed by what is happening in Ayodhya. And among the Ayodhya temple had outlived its political utility even before the temple started. The moment there was verdict from the Supreme Court, which of course is seen as people believe that it is because of Modi that the verdict came. If you go to ground, everybody talks about it, and very, very rightly, probably rightly so. But the corona mismanagement, why I say it beats all records in the country. And what the kind of things that no other government in the country, no state government went to their state assembly to make this announcement that nobody died of oxygen shortage in our state. When people have seen how people have suffered in the villages, BJP's own MLAs have stated publicly that there is not a village in UP where at least 10 people have not died. And there are 90,000 villages in UP. People have seen how bodies had to be immersed. You must have also seen pictures and videos of this, immersed in the rivers, because they had no wherewithal to burn the bodies, to cremate the bodies. They had to bury the bodies on the river banks because there was no mechanism, there was no resources to cremate the bodies. And people died of oxygen. Oxygen cylinders were being sold for thousands and thousands. Openly, all those videos are everywhere during that period. I'm not talking about later days. So, some lies you can digest, but you can't fool all people at all times. And those people who have suffered, there was this incident in Lucknow where a picture went viral. Many of you might have seen it, that there were a whole lot of bodies shown burning at the cremation ground here. There was a separate area earmarked for COVID bodies. And it looked like a forest fire. The next day, far from doing something about it, the UP chief minister got tin shed, put vertical tin sheds, huge, tall tin sheds around that. And there was a board put up there, trespassers will be prosecuted. You should not enter without permission. Can you imagine this thing, a thing like this in a cremation ground anywhere in the world? This is what has been done here.
Sharat ji, if I may just come in. See, a lot of people, I think, like I said, the BJP, at least in its present phase. So I think, the fact that people suffered during the second wave of COVID-19, not just in Uttar Pradesh, even in Delhi, which was the national capital, things were pretty bad. I think the fact that the BJP might win elections even after this, which is something which they were able to do, after demonetization also. I think in politics, these two need to be kept separate. So one doesn't undermine the sanctity of the other. If the BJP wins, it doesn't mean people did not suffer. And even if people vote for the BJP, it shouldn't mean that. That I think is the main thing, which is something Rahul was also pointing towards, that ultimately your political decision is a factor of n number of factors.
Number of factors. Agreed.
Which factor dominates, we will see. Ronak, you want to ask a question? Sorry?
Can I just 30 seconds?
Yeah.
And many of the things which we think are issues are actually not issues on voting. Anything like, there are 100 things people are going to say that this matters, but anything to become a point for voting decision, one needs to be articulated by the opposition. Two, they have to offer a different position on that. Three, voters have to believe that this offer which is being made is more credible than what we have. So switching happens in 3 stages.
Sujoy, can you please go ahead?
I fully agree with Rahul. Yeah.
Sujoy?
So no, I just see. Obviously, last time round, Mr. Modi was a factor, right? That helped, the BJP win in UP. But if I look at today, the one factor that obviously works against, Modi and the BJP in UP or pretty much across the UP, that big significant change appears to me to be the farm laws, clearly. And second of all, as you all pointed out, that obviously COVID mismanagement was an issue. And the third point is obviously, unemployment, being another severe issue. So I just want to ask the panelists, in your surveys with people and your conversations, do you get a sense that people really don't care about jobs, they don't care about lives, and they don't care about their farm livelihood, but they only want to be bothered about the religious issue? I mean, is that such an overriding factor?
I don't think that this is happening anymore. But these factors, like for instance, jobs, there's a old and young divide. You'll find, I've seen families where the parents are all for BJP because they say that Hindu party hai, mandir banwa rahe hain, so we must vote for them. But there only the son and daughter say, ki, why the hell should we vote for the party which cannot give us jobs? We hope that, all right, jobs were being sold in Samajwadi Party. That was again an open secret. But what has happened now? Why did they get jobs in these 5 years? And when they put up, as I said earlier also, when they put up an RTI query, they don't get a reply. Where have the jobs gone? 4.5 lakh jobs. And the government's claim is that they, Yogi Adityanath repeatedly claims that now they are busy saying that we'll give 2 crore jobs. And so, if you keep on telling, you keep on making utterances with nothing to back them, it will eventually affect you adversely. And that is what is happening on the employment front.
Sujay, I'll ask Rahul to respond also. But if, as the moderator, if you ask for my views on this, to brand voters, as invested in one issue, I think is slightly unfair to them. For example, it is a fact that, for the last 3-4 years, even before COVID came, the economy has been going downhill. And the BJP, in the center has not delivered. But voters, I think, also vote on I think voters are becoming very transactional today. For example, Delhi, which is the city where I live in, if you look at election results, the Aam Aadmi Party actually came third in the 2019 Lok Sabha elections. And then, less than a year later, people voted overwhelmingly for the AAP. So they probably understood that they are going to get something transactional from the AAP by voting for it in the assembly, whereas that expectation was not there. I'll say, of course, and it's a very polarized debate. A lot of people feel that the BJP is actually, our politics has become completely Hinduized and only religion matters, etc. Go back to the UP and Bihar of the 1990s, when Lalu Prasad Yadav and Mulayam Singh Yadav were at the peak of their political power. One could say that politics had become completely like castified, because ultimately, we know for a fact, if you look at statistics also, the RJD, back then Janata Dal or the SP didn't deliver economically. Bihar suffered in a big way. UP, I think, also suffered. Had these two states actually capitalized on the first 15 years of economic reforms, who knows? Maybe these two states have been very different today. But I think politicians have this ability of convincing the electorate about a narrative. And ultimately the electorate will run out of patience. It is also a function of the opposition's ability to do it. But the electorate is willing to give them chances. Whether that time or the long rope has ended in 2022 or not is something we can only debate with authority once the results are out. But I don't think it is fair to just brand voters as bigots. I think voters vote on a lot of considerations, and sometimes they're willing to give a leader a long rope. History tells us that it is not the BJP in this country which is enjoying that long rope today. So that's there. Rahul, you want to quickly weigh in on this?
Yeah, I agree with you, right? And I think this way of thinking about things, that voting on economic issues is only rational act, and voting on other things is voter being irrational. See, it's a very, very hard task for a voter to decide from the number of things that there are in the matrix. And political parties are very, very smart players. They are targeting different voters in very different ways. So for someone whose economy should matter, they will put that. For someone, they are trying to mobilize to cultural issues. In all surveys, in most of the surveys, if you just ask the question on economy concerns remain primary. They will always put unemployment, corruption, those kind of things as primary concerns. But voting decision and economic concerns are not linked, because vote is just one single act which is driven by multiple things.
Yeah, but and what Roshan said about what you said about transactional aspect, that does work, and that is probably the reason why Akhilesh Yadav is busy promising 300 units of free electricity. He's taken a leaf out of Kejriwal's manifesto, and likewise BJP is relying very heavily on one aspect which we forgot to mention, is what they themselves call, they have coined this new terminology of Labhartis, beneficiaries of free rations and this direct money transfer. And BJP is relying very heavily on that, and it does work. To some extent, it does work. So how much of it will work and how much it will convert into votes, one will see. But yes, poor people, it does. But now BJP, the opposition is busy trying to impress upon the voter that look here, this is only till March, which is a fact. It was extended beyond the corona period in November, when the government of India decided to allocate 53,000 crores to give free rations for another 4 months, which ends at the end of March, which coincides with the UP election, with the elections in these states. So let's see how much it actually, I'm sure it will impact, but how much it impacts will really make all the difference.
The bigger worry for the government, I'm sure, will be petrol diesel prices, because with crude above 100, we don't know. Ashish and Ronak, can you ask your questions in succession in that order, and then we'll get the speakers to respond.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Roshan. Very interesting discussion, Mr. Sharat and Mr. Rahulji. It was like really a pleasure listening to your very factual and data-driven approach. I have a question for each of you. One is, what is the delivery of the government welfare schemes towards the poor in UP? The delivery of cooking gas, water, and roads, electricity, and the farmers, pension that's been announced. And the other question specifically for Mr. Verma is, you gave a very interesting analysis of which communities were voting what percentage towards BJP and towards various parties. So do you have any kind of a sensitivity analysis as to which communities may swing away or towards BJP, to what extent, and what kind of seat differential does that translate to? Thanks.
Ronak, will you ask your question?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity and also very interesting discussion. I have two questions to ask. One question would be, so we obviously talk about the negatives that came out from the government. Did from the survey get any positive feedback from the people? Especially, so there are two aspects where the government keeps talking about. One is the gas availability for the women, and also the Jal Jan Yojana, where the water has reached the actual village or people. And the second aspect was more from the political angle. So when we look at, I'm from Mumbai, so I'll talk from Mumbai aspect. What happened during second wave was a lot of people went back to UP, especially to their own villages. And obviously there were questions about jobs not coming or job not, there is no job creation. But when you look at it from a standard of living point of view, people would want back to come to cities and not be in UP. So is there because people are used to city life, they wouldn't want to stay in UP and take an employment in UP. So what is your assessment on that aspect? Thank you so much.
May I?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. Well, as far as these the migratory labor is concerned, what this gentleman talked just now, you are absolutely right that people are compelled to go back to Mumbai or Kerala or Gujarat, Maharashtra, every different places, because there are the industry, unfortunately, has not, despite successive governments, holding all these kinds of investment marts and big high profile, I call them high profile drama by all successive governments, but nothing is seen on ground. There are only claims and taller claims by successive governments, which is why the labor today doesn't get, and which is why those poor chaps had to, because of Corona, drove them back to their homes, to their villages, where there are no jobs. So how this will going to be overcome and how it will impact the voting, one has to see. But as far as other things like I think Ashish asked about it, the various schemes of the government. As far as one I mentioned, the freebies, but as far as other issues are concerned, for instance, gas. I think these gentlemen, they wanted to know. Well, from what I've inquired from the oil companies, the gas in the cylinder inventories have only piled up, only increased, because the cut in the subsidy, which initially was around 250 to 300 rupees, is now reduced to 25 to 30 rupees. So people are not, as it is, prices have gone up. A cylinder costs 950 rupees. So people are not in a position to replace those cylinders. Yet, I would not rule out this going in favor of the BJP to some extent, because those who are in a position to replace their cylinders, they do attribute it to the BJP that they have a gas connection in their house. But others who do not have, which are larger in numbers, certainly they are not happy with what the government has done, increasing the prices and cutting down the subsidy. Likewise is the case as far as water is concerned. The biggest water scarce area in Uttar Pradesh is Bundelkhand, and one has seen in this very election some of the Bundelkhand constituencies have already polled, and this was an issue there, because drinking water is still a distant dream in large parts of Bundelkhand, which successive governments have not been able to provide. So, and with all this Jal Shakti mission, the problem in Uttar Pradesh is also rampant corruption, which the government claims that they have, it's a corruption-free state. Everybody concedes that Yogi Adityanath is an honest man, but as far as corruption is concerned, the common perception down the line among people is that the rates have gone up. So things actually don't trickle down. The schemes don't reach the people. The situation is very much the same, except for direct transfer has helped. Direct money transfer has helped. That now today, somebody like Rajiv Gandhi used to say that 1 rupee hum dete hain to 30 paisa jata hai. That situation is not there. People, but still in UP, such a our sarkari machinery is so smart that they find ways and means to do that also. When the money is finally transferred, the fellow down at the lowest level, at the grassroots level, manages to get his cut directly from the beneficiary.
Rahul, you want to have the last word? Rahul, are you there?
Sorry, I was mute. Thank you, Roshan. I think on the scheme front, I don't know how much of it is being actually going on the ground, but the number of beneficiaries that government claims on its website is really, really high. For a PM Ujjwala Yojana, it's somewhere around 1.5 in Uttar Pradesh, 1.5 crore beneficiaries. PM Kisan is around 2.4 crores. Jan Dhan accounts 7.8 crores. Ayushman Bharat 1.3 crore. So even if I believe there is a 25% leakage and not working, even allowing for that 75% margin, I think that's a big number on which the current government must be sort of banking on. Second, on the community-wise vote share and sensitivity analysis on that and how it will change seat share, no, we don't have that kind of analysis. And I think, Ashish, not only you, but everyone who was listening here today should be putting us part of the money that you guys are generating in greater research, so we could have greater high-frequency data to figure out what's happening. We all rely on the numbers that circulate on TV channels and newspapers, as Sharatji pointed out, that the research that is being put out is not very sort of like trustworthy. So you should be putting in resources for research centers like us to do research. And next election, I'll be able to tell you.
But CMI data, CMI is providing good data, and even you can.
No, he was talking political data, sir. He was talking political data.
CMI data. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So
next time, Ashish, I will have a greater high frequency analysis for you if you help us.
We've spent around an hour and a half. Our participants have to leave. If I can summarize the discussion which happened, I think thank you everybody.
Roshan, can I ask one question? I
Yes,
had a question from a client with regard to national politics. So basically, he's asking, how do you think the national politics will play out in a scenario where BJP could win UP with 270 plus, or if it wins but with a lower majority of say 220 types, or BJP loses? So all these three scenarios, how do you think the national politics will play out, and the strategy for the national party to be? And how do you also see the opposition or anti-BJP competition shaping up in the run-up to the election, the general election? Apart from being anti-BJP plank, what can they really offer to the electorate? So basically, how things could pan out with UP being in, 3 scenarios where they win with a landslide or a low majority or lose. And, what is the implication for non-BJP parties?
Okay, for the sake of time, I will answer that question actually.
Okay.
So, I think like Rahul said,
it's a very good question.
UP alone will not shape national politics. It is Gujarat which will also shape national politics to a very large extent, because in Gujarat, actually, it is the Congress which is in competition against the BJP. Because nationally, the biggest question which the opposition is still grappling with, and it has been grappling with it since 2014, is what to do with the Congress. I mean, do you live with the Congress or do you completely desert the Congress? That question will be answered to some extent by what happens in Punjab. Uttarakhand and Goa are, largely like symbolic states, but even that will actually shape the narrative if the Congress comes back. But the real test of the Congress will be in Gujarat. If it can actually, give a scare to, it gave a scare to the BJP last time also, but if it can actually defeat the BJP, then there'll be a huge problem for the BJP. You have heard, you've seen like before the, last couple of weeks, Sharat Pawar and Mamta Banerjee have been meeting with leaders such as KCR, who is the Telangana chief minister. So the opposition is continuously grappling with this dilemma, whether to do business with the Congress or for the larger regional front of song. The other route is also not very easy. We saw Mamta Banerjee enter with a bang in Goa and Manipur and all that. And even before the results are over, that like steam has completely fizzled out. Nobody's even talking about the Trinamool Congress anymore. Right. So it is not very easy for regional party leaders, especially outside the Hindi belt. This region from Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, this is where the BJP gets around 160, 170 out of its total Lok Sabha seats. You have actually, apart from the exception of UP and Bihar, where SP and RJD are dominant players, by and large, it's still the Congress which has to take care of the BJP. You can't defeat the BJP by, making an alliance with the DMK in Tamil Nadu. The BJP doesn't exist there. Kerala, it doesn't exist. So that is the basic thing. That's one, as far as the arithmetic of it goes. The other thing is, even if the BJP wins the UP elections with 350 seats, its problems are not going to end because of what is happening to the economy today. The first question which the central government would have to answer after March 7th, when polling has ended, does it increase petrol diesel prices by 15 or 20 rupees or not? This is a completely unenviable position the government finds itself in. What is going to be happening to inflation? What is going to be happening to growth? Once interest rates are going to go up in the United States, if advanced countries start acting prematurely to sort of kill inflation at their place, what is going to be happening to the economy? It's a huge problem, and things will get more and more difficult. I don't see any government taking petrol diesel prices up to 150 rupees or 140 rupees a liter. It'll be political suicide. Even if you've lost everything in an election, the opposition will have a huge issue. So economically, things are going to be very difficult. I think, and which is what I wanted to summarize this discussion also was, the spirit of the discussion was 2-3 things. The opposition in UP, which is largely Akhilesh, they have been flagging economic issues. They've been flagging unemployment, price rise, cattle menace, etc. But the political strategy which they seem to employ is still some sort of import from the 90s. So you want to mobilize young people on employment, but politically what you do in Eastern Uttar Pradesh is go and ally with somebody called Rajbar, who is a small caste-based party. This is something which, personally speaking, doesn't inspire me. If you want to mobilize people on economic issues, you have to actually wage economic agitation. You actually have to. The Aam Aadmi Party wanted to make corruption an issue. It actually waged an agitation, mobilized people transparently, won an election. If the SP wants to mobilize people on the stray cattle issue, you actually have to have large-scale agitations demanding that this is a problem and the government do something about it. Either legalize cattle slaughter once again or do something else. The problem is the SP wants to be clever by half. They want to sort of exploit the old caste arithmetic, which worked for their fathers very well in the 1990s. But they want to claim also that they're actually fighting on 21st century issues. This is a huge problem. It works to the advantage of the BJP because, the Hindutva, it has still been 7-8 years that Hindutva has actually gained power in this country. Maybe 10 years later, it won't work for them also. But the Mandal, wine people have actually had for 20-25 years. So they are past their sort of sell-by date, I would say. And, it is wrong to believe that political parties are sold to any idea. For example, the question about LPG cylinders. The BJP actually abolished. So there's no LPG subsidy even for Ujjwala beneficiary holders. Somebody sent in the comment box that actually the subsidy for 12 cylinders. There's no subsidy. Apart from the initial thing, you have to actually buy cylinders on market prices. There's minimal 25-30 rupees subsidies, and there's some in northeastern states. But the BJP in this election is actually promising, I think, 3 cylinders. So Amit Shah has been saying in his speeches that by Holi, you'll get 2 cylinders, 3 cylinders. Political parties are extremely nimble in this country. They know when and how to retract. If somebody like a Narendra Modi could retract farm laws, which was probably, people believe that it was the single largest economic reform to have happened in the country after 1991, we should never underestimate their ability to sort of do anything to survive politically. Because you can't do reforms or lack of reforms, if you've lost power. So we should see what the results are. I think the question which the results will answer to me personally is whether you can fight issues of 21st century with politics of the 1990s. What happens to 2024, how the BJP fares, what happens to the opposition. I think we'll have to give it some more time to be able to sort of more confidently answer this question. Thank you, Madhvi.
Thank you, Roshan, for summarizing this. So with this, we have come to the end of the session. I thank Sharat ji and Professor Verma again for their time and sharing insightful session. And Roshan, of course, for beautifully moderating the session and taking the burden off me. I'm sure it has added more gravity to the complex world of politics that we live in. Indeed, politics is clearly a very funny game, and numbers and lies can come from places that you least expect. So let's see how things pan out. Thank you for your time, everyone. Have a good evening. You may log off now. Thanks
a lot. I really enjoyed
you.
It. It was a very vibrant discussion. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.